Slavery is one of the darkest chapters in human history, but the way it's discussed today is often more theatrical than truthful. The modern reparations debate has become a political performance where facts are optional and guilt is currency. So, let's strip away the slogans and dig into the reality. Slavery was global, not just the Vatican. Let's start here. The transatlantic slave trade didn't begin or end in the United States. In fact, the majority of African slaves were sold into South America, and the Caribbean. Brazil alone received nearly 5 million slaves, more than 10 times the number brought to North America. And slavery wasn't a white-only invention. Africans enslaved other Africans. Arab slave trades didn't just last over 1,000 years. They're still happening in some regions today. While some Arab nations officially abolished slavery in the 1950s, 60s, and even as late as the 80s, reports continue to surface of ongoing human trafficking and forced servitude. In some cases, it's even more brutal. Males being castrated, families torn apart, and entire communities exploited under the radar. Indigenous tribes had their own systems. Even in the US, there were black slave owners, especially in places like Louisiana and the Caribbean. Slavery was a normalized institution across cultures. Ugly, yes, but universal. And in some places, tragically, still alive. Reparations.
Who pays?
Who pays?
Who moves?
Who profits? If reparations are about justice, then logic matters. The Confederacy upheld slavery. The Union fought to end it. So why target the federal government, especially when the North sacrificed lives to liberate slaves? That government didn't enslave anyone. The Confederacy did, and it no longer exists. So, who pays? If reparations are to be paid, they should come from the estates of actual slaveholders. But here's the twist. Not all slaveholders were white. Obama's ancestry reportedly includes slaveholders. Trump's doesn't. That's not a political jab. It's a reminder that ancestry doesn't follow party lines. And reparations logic gets murky fast. So again, who pays who? And what about the 200 million immigrants who arrived in the last century? Italians, Irish, Jews, many of whom were enslaved, persecuted, or treated like second-class citizens. Should they be held financially responsible for a system they never participated in? 40 acres and a mule was real, then revoked. In 1865, Union General William T. Sherman issued Special Field Order Number 15, which promised 400,000 acres of confiscated Confederate land to freed slaves in 40-acre plots. The federal government even lent mules to help them farm. This was the first formal attempt at reparations in U.S. history. But after Lincoln's assassination, President Andrew Johnson reversed the order and returned the land to white landowners. That betrayal still echoes today. Reparations have been paid, just not to descendants of slaves. The U.S. has paid reparations before. Japanese Americans received compensation for internment during World War II. Victims of the Rosewood Massacre in Florida received state-funded reparations. Native American tribes have received settlements for land theft and broken treaties, but descendants of enslaved Africans still waiting. Liberia, the forgotten reparation. Here's a fact that rarely gets mentioned. Liberia was established in the early 1800s as a homeland for freed African Americans funded by the American Colonization Society and supported by the U.S. government. Liberia was a real, tangible form of reparations. The Liberian flag even resembles the American one with a single star. It was a sovereign nation built as a fresh start for freed slaves. But that part of history gets erased because it doesn't fit the modern narrative of endless victimhood and international reparations are happening. Countries like the Netherlands and United Kingdom have issued formal apologies for their role in slavery. The Dutch government pledged 200 million euros to address the legacy of slavery. The UK held a reparations conference in 2023 with estimates of damages exceeding 100 trillion. But let's not lump the United States into the same category. The U.S. didn't just acknowledge slavery. It fought a bloody civil war to end it. The Union sacrificed hundreds of thousands of lives to dismantle the system. And while the Confederacy upheld slavery, the North gave land, liberty, and even a homeland. Liberia, to freed African Americans, that was a tangible form of reparations long before hashtags and headlines. The real betrayal came not from the Union, but from post-war politics. Lincoln's vision was clear. Sherman's order, 40 acres and a mule, was a start. But after Lincoln's assassination, President Andrew Johnson reversed it, handing land back to former slaveholders. That's the moment history turned its back. Not the Union, not the soldiers, and not the people who fought for freedom. So while other nations are just now acknowledging their role, the U.S. already paid in blood, land, and liberty. What's missing is an acknowledgement. It's historical honesty. Identity politics and the guilt economy! Today's reparations movement isn't just about justice. It's about control. It's about dividing people into oppressor and oppressed classes, regardless of actual history. It's about emotional manipulation, not historical accuracy. Race, as many like to point out, is a social construct. But if that's true, why is it the foundation of modern policy, activism, and media narratives? You can't call it fake and then use it to demand payment. Real justice requires real proof. Real justice isn't a government grant, it's a process rooted in proof. If someone can trace direct harm to a specific estate, great, that's a legal case. But asking millions of uninvolved people for something they didn't cause, that's not justice, that's just ideological cosplay. And let's not pretend governments are good at handling money. California has been handed billions of dollars multiple times to fix homelessness. The result? More tents, more chaos, and zero accountability. Gavin Newsom's administration is just one example. When China's delegation came to visit, the streets were suddenly spotless. So the city can clean up for communists, but not for its own citizens. That says everything. Meanwhile, taxpayers, especially long-standing communities like Black Americans and disenfranchised families, get ignored. Illegal immigrants are prioritized while the people who built the system are left behind. And let's be clear, it's not just Newsom. Many politicians, especially within the Democratic Party, follow the same playbook. They talk equity, but their bank accounts tell a different story. Modest beginnings somehow turn into multi-million-dollar portfolios. The louder they talk, the fatter their wallets seem to get. So when these same officials start pitching reparations, you have to ask, where's the money really going? Maybe 10% reaches people with verified lineage, the other 90% lost in bureaucracy, consultants, and political pet projects. And let's not forget, the US has been involved in reparations before, but only when the victims and perpetrators were clearly defined. After World War II, Germany paid over billion in reparations to Holocaust survivors and the state of Israel. That was a government-to-government agreement backed by documentation, accountability, and international oversight. It wasn't based on vague ancestry, it was based on direct, recent harm. Compare that to the current reparations debate in the US, where most claimants can't trace their lineage to slavery, and the perpetrators, Confederate slaveholders, no longer exist. It's not the same scenario, and it's dishonest to pretend it is. As for the IRS, suffering was real. Many were enslaved, sold, and brutalized, especially during the 1600s under British rule. But at that time, America wasn't even a country. The land was divided between British, French, and Spanish colonial powers. So if reparations were ever owed, they'd be directed at those empires, not the modern US government. Reparations deserve precision, not slogans, not guilt trips, and definitely not blind trust in systems that can't even track their own spending. Reparations aren't just about money. Some activists argue that reparations should include
action shade of scholarships,
land access,
public apologies, and memorials,
systemic reforms to dismantle lingering effects of slavery. But critics say these efforts often get diluted into symbolic gestures with no real impact. Reparations aren't just about settling old debts, they're about how we define justice today. If we want truth, we need precision. If we want healing, we need honesty. And if we want progress, we need to